In the living room, my greedy daughter-in-law said on speakerphone, "That witch will be gone soon, and the house will finally be ours." I stood up and served the coffee. Hours later, she got a call from the realtor and didn't say another word. The bias cup trembled slightly in my hand as I placed it on the coffee table in front of Caroline. Her perfectly manicured fingers quickly pressed the mute button on her phone, but it was too late. The damage was done. I had heard every word. "Oh, Eleanor, I didn't see you there," she exclaimed, her voice suddenly honey-sweet, a stark contrast to the venom I'd heard seconds before. My son James walked in, oblivious to the tension that now filled our living room, my living room, in the house I had spent 43 years building into a home. "Mom, you shouldn't be carrying that tray with your arthritis," James said, though he made no move to help me. I'd mentioned joint pain once, 6 months ago, and somehow it had transformed into full-blown arthritis in their narrative. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Another piece of their carefully constructed fiction that I was rapidly deteriorating. "I'm perfectly capable of serving coffee in my own home," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt inside. At 67, I wasn't exactly fragile, despite what they wanted everyone to believe. Caroline shot James a look I'd seen too many times before, a silent communication that I wasn't meant to understand but had learned to interpret all too well. It meant, "Don't push her. Let her think she's still independent." "Of course you are, Mom," James said with that patronizing tone that had crept into his voice over the past 2 years, ever since Robert passed away and they'd moved in to help me adjust. I sat down in my armchair, the only piece of furniture that remained truly mine in a living room that Caroline had systematically redecorated, item by item, removing every trace of the life Robert and I had built together. The floral sofa we'd saved for was now replaced by a sleek gray sectional. The wall that once displayed our family photos now featured abstract art that Caroline said was more contemporary. Even the color of the walls had changed from the warm yellow Robert and I had chosen to a stark white that Caroline insisted opened up the space. As I sipped my coffee, I wondered if they realized that I knew. Had they any idea that I'd been finding their real estate brochures hidden in drawers? That I'd overheard snippets of conversations about market value and, after she's gone, that I'd noticed how they'd been slowly moving my belongings to the small back bedroom, consolidating my existence to make room for their future? But hearing Caroline call me that witch with such casual cruelty, that was new. That was a line crossed. "I made almond cookies," I said, pushing the plate toward them. "Your favorite, James." "Thanks, Mom, but we're watching our sugar," James replied without looking up from his phone. He hadn't watched his sugar a week ago when he devoured half a chocolate cake, but I said nothing. Caroline's phone rang again, and this time she didn't. "Put it on speaker." She glanced at the screen, her face suddenly tense. "I need to take this," she said, standing abruptly and walking to the kitchen. Her voice was hushed, but in a house I knew every inch of, sound carried in ways she didn't understand. I could hear fragments. "What do you mean it's not possible?" And, "But we discussed this already." And finally, "We'll have to find another way." When she returned, her face was ashen. For the first time since they'd moved in, Caroline seemed genuinely shaken. She sat down next to James, whispering something in his ear that made him look up sharply at me, then quickly away. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently, stirring my coffee. "Fine," Caroline snapped, then caught herself. "Just some work stuff." I nodded, pretending to accept her lie. The realtor must have delivered unexpected news. Perhaps about the difficulty of selling a house that wasn't actually theirs to sell. I felt a small flicker of satisfaction beneath my hurt. That night, alone in what was now my bedroom, formerly the guest room, the smallest in the house, I pulled out the worn leather album from beneath my bed. Robert smiled up at me from our wedding photo, then from the day we broke ground on this house, then holding baby James on the porch we'd built together. "They want to take it all away," I whispered to his image. "Everything we built." But as I traced his smile with my fingertip, something shifted inside me. The crushing weight of betrayal didn't disappear, but alongside it grew something else. Resolve. This was my house, my life, my legacy, and I would not be erased from it so easily. The next morning, I called my old friend Margaret. Before retiring, she'd been a family lawyer for 30 years. "I need your advice," I said when she answered. "It's about the house. Two could play this game, And unlike my son and his wife, I had nothing but time to plan my next move. The morning light filtered through curtains I hadn't chosen, casting unfamiliar shadows across my bedroom floor. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering a time when this house echoed with laughter and love instead of whispered conspiracies. 2 years ago, when Robert passed away after 45 years of marriage, the silence nearly drowned me. I wandered our home like a ghost, touching the walls we'd painted together, sitting in his reading chair, sleeping on his side of the bed to feel closer to him. The grief was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until some days I could barely breathe. That's when James and Caroline swooped in with their offer to help. "Mom, we're worried about you," James had said, his arm around my shoulder as we sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Robert and I had shared thousands of meals, helped James with his homework, celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. "You shouldn't be alone in this big house," Caroline added, her practiced concern almost convincing. "What if you fall? What if something happens and nobody's here to help?" I'd been vulnerable, drowning in grief, and their lifeline seemed genuine. When they suggested moving in temporarily to help me adjust, I'd agreed, grateful for their apparent concern. How quickly temporary became permanent. How systematically they dismantled my life under the guise of helping me. It started small. Caroline rearranged the kitchen cabinets because it would be more efficient. James moved the furniture in the living room to create better flow. I'd come home from grocery shopping to find family photos replaced with Caroline's modern art prints, my garden catalogs cleared away, my knitting basket relocated to my bedroom. "We didn't think you'd mind, Mom," James would say. "You never use this space anyway." But I did mind. With each change, another piece of my life with Robert was erased, another memory blurred. Within 3 months, they'd claimed the master bedroom. "It makes more sense for us to take the larger room," Caroline had explained. "You don't need all that space, and the stairs to the second floor might be difficult for you soon." I hadn't fought it. Perhaps that was my mistake. The first of many concessions I made to keep peace. To be the accommodating mother, to not be a burden. I moved into the small guest room downstairs, surrounded by boxes of possessions deemed unnecessary clutter by Caroline's ruthless reorganizing. When I asked about certain missing items, Robert's collection of first-edition mystery novels, the antique clock his father had given us, my grandmother's china, Caroline always had an answer ready. "We put those in storage for safekeeping," or "they were gathering dust, so we packed them away," or most brazenly, "James wanted some of his father's things in our room to remember him by." Yet somehow, those treasured items never reappeared when I asked to see them. My kitchen, once my domain where I'd cooked countless family meals, became Caroline's territory. She replaced my well-seasoned cast-iron pans with expensive nonstick cookware, tossed out spices I'd collected from around the world, claiming they were probably expired, and rearranged everything until I couldn't find anything without asking. "Let me do that, Eleanor," she'd say whenever I attempted to cook. "You just relax." But what she meant was, "You're in my way. This isn't your kitchen anymore." The garden Robert and I had lovingly tended for decades, with rose bushes he'd planted for each of our anniversaries and the maple tree we'd watched grow alongside our son, was deemed too high maintenance. Caroline hired landscapers who ripped out my perennial beds to install what she called modern low-maintenance design. I came home one day to find Robert's rose bushes gone, replaced by geometric gravel patterns and a few spiky plants that required less care. I had cried that night, alone in my bedroom, mourning not just the garden but what it represented. Another piece of our life together destroyed. The physical takeover of my home was painful, but the emotional manipulation was worse. They began speaking about me in the third person when I was in the room. "Mom seems tired today," James would say to Caroline, as if I weren't sitting right there. "She's getting confused about her medications," Caroline would tell visitors, though. I'd never once mixed up my blood pressure pills. They'd finish my sentences, speak over me, make decisions without consulting me. They'd discuss my declining health in hushed tones meant for me to overhear. My friends stopped visiting because Caroline made them uncomfortable, scrutinizing every interaction as if they might be taking advantage of me. My weekly bridge club, which had been a lifeline after Robert's death, gradually stopped calling when Caroline repeatedly told them I was too tired for visitors. Isolated and increasingly confined to a smaller and smaller portion of my own home, I began to question myself. Was I truly becoming forgetful? Was I really too fragile to manage on my own? The constant undermining chipped away at my confidence, until I sometimes believed their narrative. Until yesterday, when I heard the truth, straight from Caroline's mouth. That witch will be gone soon, and the house will finally be ours. I was nothing but an inconvenience, an obstacle to their inheritance. All their help had been part of a calculated plan to diminish me, to edge me out of my own life, to erase my presence so thoroughly that by the time I died, or was shipped off to a nursing home, it would be as if I'd never lived here at all. The betrayal was a knife to my heart, but it also cut through the fog of self-doubt they'd created. In a perverse way, Caroline's cruelty had given me clarity. I rose from my bed and dressed carefully, choosing the blue blouse Robert had always loved. Today, I would begin reclaiming what was mine. Margaret's advice had been clear: document everything, secure important papers, and don't let them know I was aware of their plans. The element of surprise is your greatest advantage, she'd said. I opened my bedroom door and straightened my shoulders. In the kitchen, I could hear Caroline on the phone again, her voice low and urgent. She fell silent when I entered. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "I thought I'd make breakfast today." Caroline's eyes narrowed slightly. "You don't need to do that. I was just about to start the eggs." "I insist," I replied, moving toward the refrigerator. This is still my kitchen, after all. The flash of irritation that crossed her face was unmistakable, but it was quickly replaced by her usual condescending smile. "Of course it is, Eleanor. I'm just trying to help." As I cracked eggs into a bowl, I felt her watching me. Let her watch. Let her wonder about the call from the realtor yesterday, about what I might know, about the subtle shift in my demeanor. The game had changed. I might have been outmaneuvered before, but I wasn't defeated. Not yet. Not in the house that Robert and I had built with our own hands, the house where we'd raised our son, the house that held the story of our lives within its walls. When James entered the kitchen, he looked between Caroline and me, sensing tension but unsure of its source. "Morning, Mom," he said cautiously. "You're up early." "I have a busy day ahead," I replied. "In fact, I was thinking of having some people over this weekend." "People?" Caroline echoed, her coffee cup pausing halfway to her lips. "Yes," I said, turning to face them both. "It's been too long since I've entertained. This house was meant to be filled with friends and family." I paused, letting my gaze rest on each of them. "Don't you agree?" The look they exchanged told me everything I needed to know. My small act of rebellion had unsettled them. Good. It was just the beginning. "Eleanor, I've reviewed everything, and I have good news," Margaret said, sliding her reading glasses to the top of her head. We sat in a quiet corner of the public library, surrounded by tall bookshelves that muffled our conversation. I'd chosen this location carefully. James and Caroline never set foot in libraries, considering them outdated in the age of ebooks. I leaned forward, clutching my handbag tightly. "So the house is secure?" Margaret nodded, her expression both relieved and determined. Though retired, my old friend still had the sharp mind that had made her one of the most respected family lawyers in town. "The property is solely in your name." Robert made sure of that. "The deed was never changed after his passing, and there's no mortgage. They have absolutely no legal claim to it." The relief was so intense I had to close my eyes for a moment. Robert had always been meticulous about our affairs. Even when cancer had ravaged his body, he'd insisted on putting everything in order, just to be safe, he'd said. He couldn't have known how his foresight would protect me now, against our own son. "What about their plan to sell it?" I asked, opening my eyes. Margaret's face hardened. "They can't sell what they don't own. But the fact that they were talking to a realtor concerns me. They might be planning something more underhanded." "Like what?" "At your age alone, they might try to have you declared incompetent." Her voice was gentle, but her words hit like a physical blow. "It happens more often than you'd think. Adult children convincing doctors their parent can't manage independently, especially after losing a spouse." My stomach twisted. "They couldn't. They could try." "But," she continued, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand, "we won't let them succeed. I've drawn up some documents for you to sign that will make it much harder for them to pursue that route." She pulled several papers from her briefcase, explaining each one methodically. A durable power of attorney naming her, not James, as my representative if I became incapacitated. An updated will specifying exactly what would happen to the house after my death. A living will detailing my healthcare wishes. As I signed each document, I felt a mixture of sadness and strength. I never imagined needing protection from my own child. But here I was, fortifying my legal defenses against him. "There's something else you should know," Margaret said, her voice dropping even lower. "I did some discreet checking. Caroline has significant debt, credit cards, personal loans, a shopping habit she can't afford. James's business isn't doing as well as he pretends either. This didn't surprise me. The designer clothes, expensive vacations, new cars. I'd wondered how they maintained that lifestyle on James's modest business income. Now it made sense. They were drowning in debt and saw my house as their financial salvation. What should I do next? I asked. For now, observe. Document any concerning behavior. If they try to isolate you, resist in subtle ways. Maintain connections with friends, even if it's just phone calls. And don't let them know you're aware of their plans." I nodded, thinking of the small notebook I'd already started keeping in my nightstand, recording their daily manipulations and lies. "And Eleanor," Margaret added, "consider your endgame here. Do you want them out of your house?" The question hung in the air between us. Did I? Part of me wanted to throw them out immediately, to reclaim my space and my dignity. But another part, the mother who still remembered James as a little boy with his father's smile, hesitated. "I need time to think about that," I finally said. Margaret nodded understanding. "Whatever you decide, we'll make it happen." When I returned home, the house was quiet. James was at work, and Caroline's car was gone, probably at one of her endless lunch dates or shopping excursions. I used the opportunity to do something I hadn't dared in months: explore my own home. I started in the master bedroom, my bedroom once. Caroline had redecorated completely, removing every trace of Robert and me. Our antique mahogany furniture had been replaced with modern pieces. The walls, once a warm terracotta that Robert had spent a week perfecting, were now stark white. Even the hardwood floors we'd installed together were covered by plush gray carpeting, but it was the closet that stopped me cold. The built-in shelves where Robert had kept his collection of first-edition mysteries, passed down from his father, were empty. The books were nowhere to be seen. The small safe where we'd kept important documents was also missing. I moved quickly through the rest of the house, checking all the places where our most treasured possessions had been stored. Robert's vinyl record collection, my mother's silver service, the hand-carved chess set from our trip to Mexico, the photo albums documenting our life together, all gone. By the time I reached the basement, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. They hadn't just redecorated, they'd systematically erased us from our own home. The basement storage room had always been meticulously organized, Robert's influence. Now it was chaos, boxes stacked haphazardly, many open with contents spilling out. I recognized some of our belongings, tossed carelessly aside like worthless junk. In one corner, partially hidden behind a water heater, I spotted something that made my heart stop. A black garbage bag tied shut but splitting at the seams. Kneeling painfully on the concrete floor, I opened it. Inside were photo albums. Our photo albums. The visual record of our life together, from our courthouse wedding to James's birth, first steps, graduations, our anniversary trips, all of it stuffed into a garbage bag like trash. Next to it was another bag containing Robert's sweaters, still smelling faintly of his aftershave. I pressed one to my face, inhaling deeply, tears streaming down my cheeks. They hadn't just relegated me to a guest room in my own home. They had attempted to erase Robert completely, to pretend he had never existed. I carefully retied the bags, leaving everything as I'd found it. Then I went to my room and retrieved my notebook, documenting this new discovery in meticulous detail. The rage I felt provided clarity. This wasn't just about financial exploitation, it was about erasing a life, a history, a love story. My phone rang, startling me. It was Margaret. "I've been thinking about your situation," she said without preamble. "I have an idea that might give you some leverage without immediately forcing a confrontation." "I'm listening," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Have you ever considered making your home historic?" The question caught me off guard. "Historic? It's only 43 years old." "Not officially historic, but culturally significant. Your husband was a well-respected architect in this town. I just meant we could have prepared better. Your grandmother tires easily these days." Lily turned to me, her eyes searching my face. Is that true, Grandma? You seem fine to me. I'm having a good day, I said, squeezing her hand. And seeing you makes it even better. James cleared his throat uncomfortably. How long are you planning to stay, honey? A week, if that's okay. Lily's gaze remained on me, not her father. I've missed Grandma. We haven't really talked since Grandpa's funeral. Caroline's phone chimed with a text. She glanced at it, then shot James a pointed look. James, can I speak with you in the kitchen for a minute? Once they left, Lily's cheerful expression dropped. She leaned close, speaking rapidly and quietly. Margaret called me. She told me everything. I came as soon as I could. I felt a rush of both gratitude and concern. Margaret and I had discussed involving Lily, but I'd been hesitant to drag my granddaughter into this ugly situation. You shouldn't have to deal with this, I whispered back. Lily's eyes flashed with determination. They're trying to steal your house, Grandma. Of course I'm going to help. It's complicated, sweetheart. No, it's not, she insisted. It's wrong. Dad's changed so much since he married her. I barely recognize him anymore. From the kitchen, we could hear the urgent, hushed tones of James and Caroline arguing. I could imagine Caroline's fury at this unexpected complication in their carefully laid plans. Do they know you're in contact with Margaret? I asked. No way. As far as they know, I haven't seen any family friends since I left for college. Dad made sure of that. The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. Caroline's been isolating. All of us, not just you. Over the next few days, Lily proved herself an invaluable ally. While James was at work and Caroline was out running errands or meeting friends, we searched the house systematically. Lily charmed her way into her father's office, claiming she needed to use his computer for a school project. While there, she discreetly searched for any of Robert's old files. She also acted as my eyes and ears, catching conversations I might have missed and reporting back. Caroline, it seemed, was growing increasingly agitated by Lily's presence, especially her protective attitude toward me. She told Dad that your attachment to me is unhealthy and shows signs of cognitive decline, Lily reported, rolling her eyes. Apparently, normal grandmothers don't enjoy spending time with their granddaughters. But our most significant discovery came on the 4th day of Lily's visit. While exploring the attic, a space Caroline rarely entered due to her complaints about dust and spiders, we found a hidden treasure, Robert's backup files. Grandpa was always paranoid about losing important documents, Lily reminded me as we opened the weatherproof container tucked behind old Christmas decorations. He used to say, always keep a copy somewhere safe. Inside were duplicates of everything: the original house plans, receipts for major renovations, property tax records, insurance documents, and most importantly, dozens of labeled USB drives, containing digital copies of our financial records going back decades. This is it, I whispered, holding one of the drives reverently. This is everything we need. Lily's phone chimed with a text. She checked it and her expression turned grim. It's from Margaret. Caroline called Sunny Pines today to confirm your move-in date. They're accelerating their timeline. A cold determination settled over me. Then so are we. That evening, while Caroline was cooking dinner, a rare occurrence she undertook only when trying to create a facade of domestic harmony, Lily and I finalized our plans in hushed tones on the back porch. The Historical Society is coming day. After tomorrow, I confirmed. Everything else is in place. Are you sure you want to be part of this? It might permanently damage your relationship with your father. Lily took my hands in hers, her young face solemn beyond her years. Grandma, Dad damaged our relationship when he decided your house was more important than your dignity. I'm with you all the way. Tears sprang to my eyes. Not from sadness this time, but from a profound gratitude for this extraordinary young woman, this unexpected ally who had appeared just when I needed her most. Your grandfather would be so proud of you, I told her. She smiled, Robert's smile. He'd be proud of both of us. As we watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink over the garden Robert had designed, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since before his death. Whatever happened next, I wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed I could reclaim what was mine. The dining room table gleamed under the soft light of the chandelier Robert had installed 30 years ago. The good china, my mother's, which Caroline had relegated to a box in the basement, was set out in perfect alignment. Crystal glasses caught the light, throwing rainbow prisms across the crisp white tablecloth I'd embroidered myself decades ago. "It looks beautiful, Grandma," Lily whispered, adjusting a flower arrangement in the center of the table. "Are you nervous?" she asked, her eyes searching my face. "A little," I admitted, "but mostly I feel ready." The doorbell rang, and Lily squeezed my hand before going to answer it. Voices filled the entryway. Margaret's confident tone, the deeper rumble of her husband Dave, and Pastor Allen, who had married Robert and me 47 years ago. More guests arrived, neighbors who had known us for decades, Robert's former colleagues, friends from the church. Each arrival seemed to increase Caroline's agitation as she hovered at the edges of the gathering, clearly confused and increasingly alarmed. "Mom?" James cornered me in the kitchen, his voice low and tense. "What is all this? You didn't mention you were having a dinner party." "Didn't I?" I blinked innocently. It must have slipped my mind. You know how forgetful I've been lately. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem pretty clear-headed right now." Caroline cornered Lily by the refrigerator. "What's going on?" she hissed. "Did you organize this?" "Grandma wanted to see her friends," Lily replied calmly. "I just helped with the invitations." "She's in no condition to host a dinner party. We're in the middle of planning her move. This is completely inappropriate." Lily's expression remained pleasant but firm. "It's her house, Caroline, her friends, her decision." By 7 o'clock, 14 people were seated around my dining room table. James and Caroline sat directly across from me, with Lily at my right hand and Margaret at my left. Pastor Allen sat at the foot of the table, his presence lending a certain gravity to the occasion. As the main course was served, Robert's favorite pot roast, I rose to my feet, gently tapping my glass with a spoon. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "It means the world to me to have so many dear friends here in the home Robert and I built together." I paused, then my gaze settled on James and Caroline. "Some of you may have heard that I'm considering moving to a retirement community." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. "That's partially true. The possibility has been presented to me." Caroline's smile looked frozen on her face. James shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Before any decisions are made, however, I wanted to gather those closest to me to discuss the future of this house. After all, this isn't just a building. It's a legacy. Robert's legacy. Our family's legacy." "What you may not know," I continued, "is that recently there have been plans made for this house without my knowledge or consent. Plans to sell it as soon as I could be convinced to leave." A shocked silence fell over the table. All eyes darted between me and my suddenly pale son and daughter-in-law. "Mom," James began, his voice strained. "That's not exactly—" I held up my hand, and to my mild surprise, he fell silent. "No more lies, James. Not tonight." I turned to our guests. "For the past 2 years, since Robert's death, I have been systematically marginalized in my own home. My possessions have been disposed of, my spaces taken over, my friends deliberately driven away, all to make me dependent, isolated, and eventually compliant." Caroline's face had drained of color. "Eleanor, you're confused." I am not confused, Caroline," I said sharply, fixing her with a steady gaze. "In fact, I've never been clearer about anything in my life." I nodded to Lily, who stood and began distributing slim folders to each guest. "Inside, you'll find copies of documents that tell an interesting story," I explained. "Bank statements showing transfers from my accounts to cover house expenses, emails between my daughter-in-law and various realtors discussing the sale of this house, a house that is solely in my name. There's even a transcript of a phone call with Sunny Pines Retirement Community, arranging my placement there without my informed consent." "Eleanor," James's voice was desperate now, "this is a family matter. We don't need to involve everyone in a private discussion." "That's where you're wrong," I replied calmly. "When elder abuse is occurring, it should never remain private." The word abuse hit the room like a thunderclap. Caroline flinched visibly. "You see," I continued, "I've been playing a role these past few months, The confused, declining widow who can't manage on her own. I let James and Caroline believe I was fading away, becoming less capable, easier to manipulate. I turned back to face them directly. But I heard you, Caroline. That day in the living room, on the phone with the realtor. That witch will be gone soon. Soon. Your home was one of his early designs, wasn't it? Yes, our first major project together. We built most of it ourselves. The Historical Society might be very interested in documenting it. Maybe even arranging for it to be photographed inside and out for their archives. It would create a public record of the house as it was intended to be. I understood immediately what Margaret was suggesting. Having strangers document the house would force James and Caroline to explain the missing items, the redecorating, the changes they'd made without my permission. It would shine a light on their actions. That's brilliant, I said slowly. Robert would have loved the recognition too. He was always so proud of this house. It also establishes community interest in the property. Makes it harder for them to quietly dispose of your possessions or make major changes without raising questions. By the time we ended the call, a plan was taking shape in my mind. Not just a defensive strategy to protect my home, but a way to honor Robert's memory and perhaps even teach our son a lesson about respect and family heritage. I heard a car in the driveway, Caroline returning from whatever outing had occupied her day. I quickly hid my notebook and composed myself, ready to play the role of the oblivious, slightly addled mother-in-law they believed me to be. But inside, something had shifted. The fear and hurt were still there, but overshadowed now by determination. They had underestimated me. They thought I was fading away, becoming less, becoming invisible. They were wrong. I was just getting started. I've been thinking, I said softly, pushing my breakfast around my plate. Maybe you're right about this house being too much for me. The fork in Caroline's hand paused halfway to her mouth. James looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised in surprise. The calculating gleam that immediately appeared in my daughter-in-law's eyes was unmistakable. Really, Mom? James asked, setting his phone down. That's unexpected. Caroline quickly composed her features into an expression of practiced concern. Eleanor, we only want what's best for you. This big house, all these stairs and maintenance issues, it's a lot for anyone to handle alone. I nodded meekly, keeping my eyes downcast. I know. I've been stubborn. It's just hard to let go. Of course it is, Caroline soothed, reaching across the table to pat my hand. But think of the freedom you'll have in a nice retirement community. Activities, friends your own age, no worries about home repairs or yard work. I glanced up, my eyes deliberately watery. Would you help me look at some places? I don't even know where to start. The triumph that flashed across Caroline's face was so naked, so unguarded, that for a moment I glimpsed the true person beneath her carefully maintained facade. She was already mentally spending the proceeds from my house sale. Absolutely, she gushed. I have some brochures already. Just information I picked up, in case you ever wanted to consider options. Of course you do, I thought, maintaining my fragile smile. You've been planning this for months. The moment I closed my bedroom door, I heard their excited whispers in the kitchen. I couldn't make out the words, but their tone told me everything. They thought they'd won. I smiled to myself as I pulled out my phone and texted Margaret. Phase 1 complete. They took the bait. The next 2 weeks unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated. Caroline threw herself enthusiastically into researching retirement communities, scheduling tours, and bringing home glossy brochures. I feigned interest, asking questions and taking notes, all while observing how they became increasingly less guarded around me. They began speaking more openly about their plans for after I moved out, after they took possession of the house. Caroline started measuring rooms and researching contractors for the renovations she'd always wanted to make. James called his golfing buddies, promising parties once they had the place to themselves. We should list it right away, I overheard. Caroline telling James one evening when they thought I was napping. The market's hot, and we could make a fortune if we sell before you-know-who actually needs the retirement home money. Mom might not agree to that, James replied, though his tone lacked conviction. Caroline laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Please, she's already agreed to move out. Once she's settled in one of those places, she'll sign whatever we put in front of her, especially if we tell her it's for her own good. I bit my tongue to keep from revealing myself. The son I'd raised, the boy who'd once helped his father and me paint these very walls, now dismissing me as if I were a child incapable of making decisions. While Caroline drove me to tour various retirement facilities, I was busy setting other wheels in motion. I visited the local historical society with Margaret, sharing Robert's original architectural drawings for the house. The society's director was thrilled, especially when I mentioned allowing them to document the house for their archives. I also visited my bank, securing my financial records and setting up new accounts that neither James nor Caroline could access. Most importantly, I reconnected with people Caroline had systematically driven away, my bridge club, old friends, and neighbors who'd stopped visiting because of Caroline's hostility. Meanwhile, I continued my act at home, becoming gradually more forgetful, more dependent. I asked Caroline to help me with simple tasks I was perfectly capable of handling. I misplaced items and appeared confused about basic household matters. "Mom seems to be declining faster than I expected," James remarked one evening, loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. "It's probably the stress of the move," Caroline replied. "Once she's in a facility with proper care, we won't have to worry anymore." Their casual cruelty stung, but I used the pain to strengthen my resolve. Every dismissive comment, every manipulative action, I documented all of it in my growing journal. Then came the day Caroline brought home forms from Sunny Pines, the least objectionable of the retirement communities we'd visited. "They have an opening next month," she announced brightly over dinner. "I've put down a deposit to hold it for you. Isn't that wonderful?" She pushed a stack of papers toward me. I glanced at them, noticing immediately that they weren't just admission forms for Sunny Pines. Mixed in were documents related to my house, power of attorney forms, property transfer authorizations. "There's so many," I murmured, feigning confusion. "Could I review these tonight and sign them tomorrow?" That night, I photographed every page with my phone and sent the images to Margaret, who confirmed my suspicions. They were trying to trick me into signing over my home and financial control. The next morning, I returned the papers to Caroline with a few key signatures missing, the ones that would have given them control. I pretended not to understand which lines needed signing. "Oh, Eleanor," Caroline sighed with exaggerated patience. "You missed some important spots, here and here." I watched as she pointed to exactly the documents Margaret had flagged as problematic. "I'm sorry, dear. My eyes aren't what they used to be." For the next week, I maintained my performance of increasing frailty and confusion. Each incident was met with meaningful glances between my son and his wife, confirming their belief that I was declining rapidly. That triumph came to an abrupt end when I overheard Caroline on the phone with the realtor again. "Yes, we're listing." "Next month," she was saying, her voice low. "The old lady signed most of the paperwork already." "No, she doesn't understand what she's signing." "Yes, full asking price. We won't accept less." I retreated silently to my room and picked up my phone. It was time for the next phase. "Margaret," I said when she answered, "I think we need to move up our timeline. They're planning to list the house next month." "Are you ready?" she asked. I thought of Robert, of the life we'd built, of the son we'd raised who had become a stranger to me. I thought of Caroline's cold calculation, their casual cruelty, their eagerness to erase me from my own home. "More than ready," I replied. "Let's do it." The doorbell rang at precisely 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. Caroline looked up from her laptop with a frown, clearly annoyed by the unexpected interruption. "Were you expecting someone?" she asked, her tone making it clear that I shouldn't have been. "Not that I recall," I replied, maintaining my recently established pattern of mild confusion. "Perhaps it's a neighbor?" James emerged from the den where he'd been watching golf. "I'll get it." I remained seated, outwardly calm though my heart was racing. This was a pivotal moment in our carefully orchestrated plan. The door opened, and I heard a young, familiar voice. "Hi, Dad. Surprise, Lily." James's genuine shock was evident. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at college?" "Fall break," came the reply. "I thought I'd come see Grandma. It's been ages." My granddaughter Lily appeared in the living room doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her smile bright and genuine when she spotted me. At 19, she was the spitting image of her father at that age. Before Caroline, before greed, had twisted him into someone I barely recognized. "Grandma." She crossed the room quickly and enveloped me in a hug that smelled of strawberry shampoo and youth. Caroline's tight smile didn't reach her eyes. "Lily, what a surprise. You should have called first." "Why?" Lily asked innocently, though I caught the slight edge in her voice. "It's Grandma's house. I've always been welcome here." A flicker of irritation crossed Caroline's face. Of course you are. Of course you are. And the house will finally be ours. Those were your exact words. Caroline's face contorted with fury and embarrassment. You were eavesdropping on a private conversation. In my own living room? I raised an eyebrow. Hardly eavesdropping when... You put it on speakerphone. Lily stood beside me, her presence solid and supportive. I found Grandpa's records in the attic, she added. Every improvement, every repair, every investment they made in this house over 43 years, plus photos of all the things that have been removed or replaced without Grandma's permission, since you two moved in. I reached for the final folder on the sideboard, thicker than the others, bound in blue leather. This, I said, holding it up, contains my decision about the future of this house. A decision I've made with a clear mind and full legal counsel. I've established a trust, I announced. The Robert Caldwell Memorial Trust. Upon my death, this house will be donated to the Historical Society as an example of mid-century residential architecture with specific provisions that it be used for educational purposes and community events. Caroline's gasp was audible. You can't do that. I already have, I replied simply. The papers were filed yesterday. What about us? James demanded, his voice rising. Where are we supposed to live? That's an excellent question, I said, my voice hardening. One you should have considered before attempting to defraud your own mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Pastor Allen cleared his throat and offered a brief prayer that spoke of reconciliation, forgiveness, and justice, each word landing with precision in the charged atmosphere. When he finished, I looked directly at James and Caroline. I am not asking you to leave tonight. That would be cruel, and despite everything, I have no desire to be cruel, but I am giving you 30 days to find alternative living arrangements. 30 days? Caroline's voice rose in panic. That's impossible. It's considerably more notice than you plan to give me before shipping me off to Sunny Pines, I pointed out. As for your financial situation, I continued, which I understand is precarious, I'm prepared to offer some assistance, under certain conditions. James looked up, a flicker of hope crossing his features. Margaret has drawn up an agreement. In exchange for your voluntary departure from this house, the return of all items belonging to me or Robert that have been removed, and your participation in family counseling, I will provide a one-time gift to help you establish a new residence. Family counseling? James scoffed. You can't be serious. Completely serious, I replied, because despite everything, you are still my son, and I have to believe that somewhere inside, you is the boy Robert and I raised to be honest, compassionate, and honorable. Something flickered in James's eyes. Shame, perhaps, or a glimmer of the person he used to be. And Lily, I added, turning to my granddaughter, I've established a separate educational trust for you. No matter what choices your parents make, going forward, your future is secure. Lily's eyes widened in surprise. This was one detail I hadn't shared with her beforehand. This house, I continued, was built with love. Robert and I poured our hearts into every brick, every beam. I won't allow it to be sold off to strangers or used to pay for Caroline's shopping habits or James's business failures. My voice softened slightly as I looked at my son. And it will stand as a testament to what Robert and I built together. Not just a house, but a legacy of integrity, hard work, and love. The room was utterly silent. Then, from the far end of the table, someone began to applaud. It was Dave, Margaret's husband, a man of few words but strong principles. One by one, others joined in until the entire table, except James and Caroline, was applauding. I blinked back tears as I took my seat again, Lily's hand squeezing mine beneath the table. The pot roast is getting cold, I said simply. Let's eat. As the evening drew to a close and guests began to depart, each one embraced me warmly. Pastor Allen held my hands in his and spoke quietly. Robert would be proud of you, Eleanor. So proud. Those words meant more to me than he could know. Later, alone with Lily in the kitchen, I finally let the tears come. Not tears of grief or loss, but tears of relief, of vindication, of triumph. I had reclaimed my house, my dignity, and perhaps, most importantly, my voice. What happens now, Grandma? Lily asked softly. I looked around the kitchen, my kitchen again, at last, and smiled. Now we rebuild, together.